All right, welcome. And today we're reading from The Apples from the Orchard. And this book is the book that is the. Let's get this going here. Hold on. 1 second. Oops. On Shoulder Grid, DP. Okay, back over here. This. Oh, good. Okay. So we're back in the book with Apples from the Orchard, and the book, as I shared with you in the past, what I'm going to be doing is reading with you the English of it, and it is not regular type of learning that we're doing over here. We're doing a learning that is quite unusual in comparison to what you may be used to, but that's what these teachings are. I'll tell you my own experience is that in learning these teachings, although much of it is something that's beyond my own understanding, but the parts that get into my mind and into my being over time, year after year, they penetrate my mind and my perspective in a very deep way, which would be a longer conversation too. So let's get straight to it. It's from this book called Apples from the Orchard, but I'm going to read it right here with you. And I'm going to read it, and then when I feel like it's necessary for me to chime in and to give and my thoughts or whatever that I think is necessary, then I'll be delighted to do that. So this is this week's Torah portion. And Jacob last week left the city, or last week he left Isaac after receiving the blessings, having to run away from his brother Esau, who was looking to take his life. And now he was instructed by his father who he should not marry, and he understood from his father's ways and from his grandfather's ways of what he should do in order to find the right match. So over here, it says over here, now Lavan had two daughters. The name of the elder one was Leah, and the name of the younger one was Rachel. Leah's eyes were tender, while Rachel had beautiful features and was of beautiful appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said it to Lavan, his future father-in-law, I will work for you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. So Jacob worked for Rachel 7 years, but in his eyes they seemed a mere few days because of his love for her. Jacob then said to Lavan, give me my wife, for my time is up, and let me marry her. So Lavan gathered together all local people and made a feast. When it was evening, he took his daughter Leah, the older daughter, and brought her to Jacob. When I say older, they were twins, but she was the older of the two. And he consummated the marriage with Leah. When morning came, now just simple understanding, the reason why this was possible back in the day was because back in the day, the type of garb that the bride would wear and the type of conduct that they would conduct themselves, it was easy for something like that to take place, especially when you have a twin that you're speaking about. Back to our story. When morning came, behold, it was Leah. So Jacob said to Lavan, what is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I worked for you? Why did you deceive me? Lavan replied, in our region, it's not done to give a younger daughter in marriage before the older. Complete the bridal week of this one, then we will give you that one too, in return for the work that you will do for me for another 7 years. Jacob complied and completed the bridal week of the one, and then Lavan gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Jacob also married Rachel, and he loved Rachel even more than Leah. He then worked for Lavan another 7 years. God saw that Leah was hated, and she opened her womb while Rachel remained barren. Okay, now understand that when you read the Torah, as I've shared with you in the past, it's so important to be present to the fact that the Torah is a story that is what is also referred to as the original metaphor. In other words, the Torah has many layers to it. So that conversation in its own right begs many questions. We're going to go straight into where the Arizal goes, because that's our conversation. All right. The mystical significance of Jacob and his two wives, Rachel and Leah, is as follows. Rachel and Leah personified the two-part sufim of Nukva, while Jacob in general personified Ze'er Ampin. Okay? So if you're not familiar with Kabbalah, it's going to be, I'm going to do my best to put the words so that it could be understandable to the best possibility. So Nukva is a feminine, and Ze'er Ampin is a masculine. Everything in the world that's occurring is happening because there's something going on behind the scenes. Today we could see that through microscopes, and that's a longer conversation. The conversation that we're talking about, what's going on behind the scenes, is that there's a masculine and a feminine energy that interact constantly at every level in order for all reality to be in existence. Now, there are the cosmic forces that represent large ideas, so to speak, that are prerequisites to the Jewish people, and those are embodied in the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Specifically over here, we're talking about the feminine energy that's going to receive the possibility of uniting heaven and earth together, are personified by two, Rachel and Leah, and Jacob is the one that's supposed to be drawing the energy for them to do what they could do, for them to do what they do best, by manifesting it. So the feminine is a manifesting, and the Jacob is the light that comes forth, which is referred to in the Kabbalistic terms as Zer Ampin. Know that Jacob has two names, for he was originally named Jacob, and this name applies from him when he had only rectified Zer Ampin from chest down. He then personified only that level of spirituality and lower, as is known. Rachel's stature relative to Zer Ampin is from the chest down. So here's what's going on over here. The idea of Zer Ampin being perfected and being rectified is the following, just to use terminology that is used in Hasidism. In the terms of Zer Ampin, what the meaning in this regard, Yaakov is representing Zer Ampin. When we look inside of us, what's Zer Ampin? It's our characteristics, the way that we emotionally are operating. A perfected Ze'er Ampin would be one that's shining, one that is perfect in judgment, filled with empathy, and perfect in truth, etc. I mean, we're talking about, a very long conversation. Yaakov being the one to personify, the one to perfect what a human being looks like when a human being is in a perfect state of an emotional response, the most healthy, the most aligned state. That's the rectification of Ze'er Ampin. But there's a different rectification. The next rectification is even higher than that. Because even when one, for example, in our example, even when one perfects their emotional response and they're no longer being driven by the animalistic reactions that are prevalent in the mankind, and instead are being driven by the spirituality that drives them to be in the image of Hashem, in the image of Elohim. So when a person is doing that, there's different ways a person could do it. A person could do it where their personification is one where there's a perfect sense of from the within to the out, but there's resentment going on. There's still things going on in the head. So that would mean similar to somebody who rectified the Zer Ampin, the lower part, but they haven't rectified yet the higher part. The higher part we're going to get to in a moment. So if you think about the feminine aspect, Rachel represents the level of Jacob before he gets his next name. We're talked about him getting two names. Originally, before he gets the second name, Jacob is operating at a level where his feminine counterpart is Rachel, and that's why what Rachel represents in terms of manifestation, he loves, and not so with Leah. Okay, and this is it is therefore written, and Jacob loved Rachel, the latter being also termed the revealed world, as is known, for the revelation of lights is from Zer Ampin's chest down, for it is there that Yesod of Ima ends. Leah's stature, in contrast, is from the chest of Zer Ampin up, for there the lights are covered. She is therefore termed the hidden world. Okay, you may give up now. Don't give up. I hope you're following inside. We do have a link there. Let's just go through the words that are written here in the commentary, and then let me see what I can do to fill in. So we just read what we've just read. Ima is the intellect, specifically Bina, the full develop. Ima means mother. So Bina, which is in the intellectual process, we talked about the emotional, who we are emotional, but then there's an intellectual way in which we all occur. The first stage of it is when something from not the conscious comes to the conscious, in like a brand new idea. The second one is a processing of it. That's Bina. That the first one is called the father. The second one, the processing evaluation of it, is called the mother, Bina. And so specifically, the Ima is the intellect, specifically Bina, the full development of the inside of Chachma. So you have a brand new idea, but it has to have a if this, then what? If this, that's the feminine aspect of the intelligence. That's Bina. And therefore it's called the mother. The emotions of the parts of Zer Ampin function best when the intellectual comprehension that gives rise to them is still present in them in some way. Without this tie to the intellect, the emotions are quickly derailed and diverted by the animal soul to its own concerns. In other words, when one has an inspiration to change a behavior, to change a way that they feel about something, the more enlivened that meditation is, the more filled up that understanding is of why that should be the case, the more possible that the reaction will be and the response will be accordingly. But if not, the other side within us will come in. The yesod of Ima is a drive within the intellect to actualize itself, and this drive is present in the emotional consciousness as far as the upper third of its tiferet. That is, within the emotion's own intellect, Chacham Bina Das, the primary emotions, Chesed, Gur, Tiferet, and in the intellectual aspects, upper third. I'm going to give it just an example of some sort shortly, of the central emotion Tiferet. From that point on, the emotions take on a life of their own, so to speak, and the yesod of Ima, the thrust of the intellect to actualize itself, is no longer felt. Thus, the upper half of Zer Ampin is called the concealed world. For at this level, the emotions are still concealed within the intellect, while the lower half of Zer Ampin is called the revealed world. For only there do the emotions fully assert themselves. Okay, this is a very, very heavy subject, and these words, obviously, one has to get used to. The deal is the following: that there's a process to everything, and even when if you could think back to a time in your life that you made a change in how you feel about something, there was a process to that too, and that process really is a process in Kabbalah referred to as going through the Abba, Father, Chachma, wisdom, the first insight that brought that transformation, Bina, understanding, the mother, evaluation, and that understanding brought the way that you now connected to that next experience that in the past you would have connected to differently. So the emotional response that changes, the emotions is it's a ampin. So you have the father and the mother, and then you have the children, which is the ampin. Okay. Now, in the process of the perfection of the Ze'er Ampin, there are different levels, as was just mentioned over here. And if you think about emotional immaturity in your own life, you can also realize that even though you were emotionally mature for a great deal of time, on many levels, but there certainly, if you're a person who works on yourself, you can look back at a certain time and realize, even then, that you thought you were mature, you weren't mature. And perhaps that would be an example of something that at the current time, that inspiration is in the concealed world. It's not yet revealed inside you. So whatever is revealed, I'm just putting that out there. All right, we're going to go further. Thus it is written in the Zohar, come see when Jacob served Laban for the first 7 years. A voice went out and said, from the world to the world, meaning from the hidden supernal world to the Jubilee. Before this, it is written, come see the Jubilee. It is everywhere hidden and it is not revealed, while the sabbatical year is revealed. So, these are all, this is Zohar. If you're not familiar with the Kabbalah, this is kind of what much of it would look like, so which requires a teacher. Well, I'm glad we have Moshe here, so we're going to go through his words, and then let's see. Okay, according to the Zohar, when Jacob had finished serving Lavan for the first 7 years, and Lavan tricked him into marrying Leah, Hashem said to Jacob, it is written, blessed be Hashem from the God of Israel, from the world to the world, meaning it was the divine providence that you married, it was by divine providence that you married Leah first, because in order to reveal divinity in the world, that is to bless God, you must first rectify the higher world, which is personified by Leah, and only then the lower one, which is personified by Rachel. Okay? It's not going into this right now, so it's going to go into it a little bit further, but it's going to explain that the higher world, Leah, is the world of thought, and Rachel is synonymous with the world of speech. The Zohar also contrasts the Jubilee year with the sabbatical year. Both of these years are associated with the numbers 7. The sabbatical year is the 7th year of the agriculture cycle, while the Jubilee year is the year after 7 agricultural cycles of 7 years each, the 50th year. Thus, the Jubilee year is a more encompassing 7th than is the sabbatical year, a higher perspective and order of consciousness. The fact that the Jubilee is a 50th year associates it naturally with Ima, for there are 50 gates of understanding. Okay, so I just want to tell you about the gates of understanding. Again, Bina, remember, is the in the soul. The function of Bina is the development of an idea and the expansion and the evaluation of that thought. But the idea of 50 gates, there are 50 gates to Bina. It's really fantastic. It's an amazing idea. If you think about it, all of our decisions are made because of whatever knowledge we have. Sometimes a person gives you a little piece of information and it turns into a key. And that key, the next time something comes your way, you have a complete different reaction to it because you have that key. You have a new understanding of whatever that is. Let's just say, you found that there's a person that's in your life. You found they're a spy. That's a key. So imagine there are 50 keys to the all understanding. Even Moses only got to the 49th. So the Jubilee year, although it is a agricultural cycle that we're talking about, but beyond the agricultural cycle, there's also the idea of it, which represents this totality, which is represented by the 50 gates of Bina, which is something that the Torah enlightens us to so much of it. And the Messianic era is when everyone gets to experience the 50 gates of Bina. The fact that the Jubilee year is the 50th year associates with Ima, okay, that we did. Based on this, the Zohar identifies the Jubilee year with the upper half of Zer Anpin, where Ima is manifest, and the sabbatical year with the lower half of Zer Anpin, where Ima is no longer manifest. In this imagery, the Jubilee is Leah, the hidden world, and the sabbatical year is Rachel, the revealed world. Okay. Obviously, there's a lot here, and we go further. There is a hidden world and a revealed world. I just want to say that if you think about the subconscious would be considered the hidden world, meaning there's so much of the way that we're operating, which is not based on decisions that not based on decisions that I make consciously because of something that I could give you an answer for right now, but they're there. But they're there in a concealed way. Okay, so that would be an idea. This is something, by the way, if you learn Hasidus Chabad, you're going to get a tremendous, especially the teachings of the 5th Chabad Rebbe. So much of it is translated. You'll get a tremendous insight. You'll get tremendous insights, plural, in these ideas and how we operate, and how we could therefore also understand deeper the way that Hashem puts, okay. Thus, there's a hidden world and a revealed world. Now, Leah extends opposite 7th sphere of Ze'er Anpin, Keter, Chachma, Bina, Da'at, Chesed, Gvura, and the upper third of Tiferet, that is until the chest. These were manifest as the 7 years which Jacob worked for Leah. They were hidden from him, for he did not think that he was working in order to marry Leah, as it is stated in the Zohar. Because he had not yet reached that level in his own development, he therefore could not realize that his first 7 years of work were actually earning him Leah. So I just want to, what he said over there, he says, where Leah is up until. So it really is an interesting thing when you think about, because this is elaborated in Hasidus. But when you talk about the realm of thought, sometimes the people with the greatest ideas, but not sometimes, but if you think about all of the great ideas, they reach up until a certain place of within our emotions. Once those get ignited, there's another set of our emotions were expressed to the outside. So Leah is that which is the thought level and inspiration to that which is within, and Rachel is more associated with the feminine energy, which is without, like speech. So Yaakov, because Yaakov in the level that, remember, all of the for the journey of the patriarchs and matriarchs are all about manifesting the divine light, which was derailed, so to speak, by Adam and Eve. We spoke about last week with the Arizal, how the patriarchs and the matriarchs, they are reincarnations of Adam and Eve. So here they are in the rectification of that all. So this is all why this all is important in this conversation, and in that rectification, we're being brought to this understanding of the process of which it was, and that Yaakov thought that his rectification was at one level, which was more, of course, in line with Rachel, but he was unaware of that other level because it wasn't yet revealed to him because of the level that he was at in terms of his relationship with his next name, which would come later, which is the name Yisrael. This is because Jacob had not yet reached this level during his lifetime, so 7 years were hidden from him. This is why Jacob hated Leah. He had not reached her level. During the 20 years Jacob spent at Lavan, he rectified the entire parts of Zer Ampin. Only then could he appreciate Leah. So it's I don't know. I have such a hard time with that word. He hated. I think it was more that he hated what he believed. He believed what she represented, and perhaps there was a conflict in some of his ways in which he was doing whatever he was doing. And although he remained at tzaddik the whole time, but it was only later on is what's being said, that conflict was when Yaakov then realizes, oh, she's so much higher than what I thought her to be, and he wasn't capable of being present to that because he wasn't there yet. He wasn't at that level yet. This is because Jacob. So we said that. But after he rectified the entire span of Zerampin, he was called Israel, as we have explained on that passage. And the name Israel is composed of the same letters of the word ahead from me, for then he rectified Zerampin all the way up to its head. Yisrael is spelled the same way as Lirosh, which means head for me. Yaakov was renamed Israel on his way back into the land of Israel after having completed his way with Lavan. But in the beginning, he was at its bottom. It's Netzach Hod Yisod. This is why he was called Jacob. Yaakov, the heel. Yaakov means he will heal, for the noun Akev, heel. Okay, so what that means, in just in layman's language, is that Yaakov's first working on himself had to do with the outer perimeters of self. The outer perimeters of self are as a Netzach Hod Yisod, which we just was mentioned here. The Netzach Hod Yisod are very behavioral. They're the part of ourselves where we can. They're part of who we are, but we have the ability to have such an intense level of discipline that regardless of what's going on within the emotional self, we could be 100% in control of our behavioral self. So when he says that Yaakov was first at the Netzach Hod Yisod, it means Yaakov's work that he worked on himself began with his behavioral self, and then he worked on his emotional response to align it more, and only then afterwards did he work on did he appreciate the higher levels of purification of self, of purification, which was represented by Leah, but not until he got the name Yisrael. Once he reached her level, he coupled only with Leah, for Rachel had already died. He was also buried only with Leah in the Machpelah cave, which is in Hebron, but not with Rachel, which is on the way in Beit Lechem. We will now explain the mystical levels personified by Leah and Rachel. Okay, so get ready for some, the way that it's written over here. Obviously, these are all words that have a lot behind them, and we do our best. Rachel issues from the radiance of Yesod of Ima after it has been revealed, that is, from the chest down of Zer Ampin. This radiance being from Ima's back for the front of Ima is manifest as a 63 name Havaya. The simple regressive iteration back of the 63 name equals 72. And the spelling out of this iteration equals 166. All that can be revealed from Ima into Zer Ampin. Ima, remember, is the process of understanding the new concept, and Zer Ampin is emotional. So the most that could come from the intelligence into the emotions is what's called its back, its superficial aspects. The intellect in all its own intensity cannot shine directly into the emotions, for the emotions are by nature non-intellectual, only a diffuse radiance of the intellect. You get that? So the way it works is that we have the emotional way that we operate, who we are, how we understand things, etc. Then we have the intellectual way. We have the intelligence that gives us the information or whatever it does. But by nature, the intelligent spectrum of who we are and our emotion spectrum are very different. The intelligence spectrum is very removed from emotion. It's very objective. That real once intelligence is driven by emotions, it's not really intelligence; it's emotions. So the point is that therefore, only when we get excited about something, only a certain part of that inspiration is actually vested into, like it says over here, into the memory of the intellectual inspiration that gave rise to this emotional response, can remain in the consciousness when we switch to emotional mode. This is something, again, very much elaborated in Hasidism. The four spellings out of the name Yud He Vav He, Havaya, 72, 63, 45, 52, which is a different place, goes into, maybe he shows it over here. Yes, he does. No, it doesn't. But the four spelling out the name of the presence of Ima within Zer Ampin then is the back of Ima, or the back of the 63 name. The back of the name is indicated by the regressive iteration of the Parsha, where we see the letters of the name turning their backs to us, one by one, as they withdraw into a higher level for the 63 name. This is, okay, so basically, we're not getting into the details of this, but in Kabbalah, everything is, of course, energy. The names of God are the portals of energy through which the infinite transmits the divine into all realms. And there's a lot to that. There's the front side, which is where inspiration or the light comes from, where it's revealed in a revealed way. And then there's the back side where it's diffused. And in order for there to be the existence the way that it is over here, there has to be a lot of what's called backside energy. Backside energy is usually something that's associated with the different spellings of the name, one of the names of God, which is for a different conversation. Okay, so we're going to just go back into the subject matter. We're doing our best. The sum of these two numerical values is that of Rachel. In contrast, Leah is the radiance of Yesod of Ima, further up on the level of Das of Zer Ampin, Malchut of Ima, which is at the level of, together with Ima's Yesod, shines outward behind Zer Ampin's head, and there it becomes the Parsha of Leah, as it's explained in Shar HaMitzvahs on the verse, he shall not have too many wives. Okay, a lot of this is a very cryptic, of course. Let's say the words over here, I'll just hopefully he'll sum it up in a way that we can best take it in. Present within Yesod of Ima is Malchut of Ima, the intellect's drive for expression. The intellect expresses itself at the levels of the emotions. Intellect through thought. Thought is thus the way the intellect expresses itself in the intellectual context of the emotions, as opposed to speech, which is how intellect expresses itself in a pure emotional context, or in the emotional context of the emotions, as opposed to the intellectual context of the emotions. So here you got it. Leah's thought, intellectual expressing itself through the intellectual component of emotions, and Rachel's speech, intellectual, expressing itself through emotional components of emotion. Perhaps one way of putting this is that there are different ways that we express our love to each other. And the need for words is obvious. And sometimes people are, they're very expressive at the level of words. And it could be that a person who's only communicating at the level of words, if they don't hear the right words, then they're not feeling it. But there's a different way that one could express emotions. But it's a way that it's of a different kind. It's of a different ilk, if you will. So it's over here expressed as intellectual, expressing itself through the intellectual component of emotions. To be discussed, okay? But anyway, Leah represents the rectification of that level of thought, and Rachel is the rectification of speech. This is the mystical significance of the knot of the head of tefillin, which is called the dalet. The knot of the head tefillin is placed in the nape, is that what it is, of the neck behind the head, and according to the Arizal, should be shaped like the letter dalet. The numerical value of the letter dalet is 4, indicating the 3 spheres of the intellect das, subdividing into the 2 origins of chesed and gvura. Thus, this knot indicates the emergence of the parts of Leah, thought, from the back of the head. So the tefillin are all about manifesting divine into our emotional being and us becoming different in how we operate and how we respond. So that's what tefillin are about. And therefore, every little part of it is part of that. And the idea of the das, of the intelligence, being subdivided into chesed and gevura, in actual context, in actual reality, what that means is that the way that we dish out our love, or to what we dish our love out to, versus to where we dish out our restriction, or to where we are on the left side of things, meaning restriction or anger, which are all by the gevura part of us, when they're driven by a higher way of thinking. So then there's a different way in which we will respond. So the tefillin is the communication that happens, and therefore that detail is an important detail, dishing that possibility of higher intelligence, and therefore not being driven simply by the animal self within. Vayeitize parts of Shalom Leah is the complete parts of extending from Keter to Zer Ampin to its chest. Yeah, we're going to go further without going into trying to explain what that is for right now. The reason it is called Leah is because the parts of the supernal Ima is known as the name Elokim, as it is divided into 2 parts. Who, which is me, Mem Yud, and these, Eila, as is mentioned in the Zohar, together, which is the same letters of Leah. In its exposition of the mystical meaning of the verse, who are these that fly like a cloud? That's right here in Hebrew. Mi Eila. So that's this letters, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, are the same as Leah also. Although in some contexts, Ima is associated with the 63 name, Havaya, as we said, in others it is associated with the name Elokim, in as much as a tzimtzum of the brilliance of the insight of Chachma. So Bina usually is associated with the second spelling out of God's name, which is 63, but what's mentioned over here is also associated with the name Elokim, because the name Elokim indicates the contraction of light, and in order for there to be the evaluation of something, the totality of the inspiration has to be put aside, and the evaluation has to have an independence of some sort. That's a contraction of the original light. The name Elokim is spelled Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem. These letters form the 2 words Mi and Eila. These letters of the word Eila can be arranged to spell Leah. The explanation of this is, from Keter to the upper half of Tiferet of the supernal Ima is called Hu, while from the lower half of the Tiferet downward is called These. The radiance of these issues from the back of Zer Ampin and becomes Leah. Okay, so this is a Keter, means the crown. And remember that Leah and Rachel both express a different, or are synonymous with a different part of the process of the light coming from above to below. And when we apply it in our own beings, it gives us a somewhat of an understanding. So Keter is the crown. Crown, by the way, is the original will. So Leah represents the inspiration that gets the engine going in terms of, think about the transformation as an example. So in the transformation, there are 2 stages. there's the inspiration for it, the development of that, and the way that it gets one within, and then there's the expression of it from without. And the Leah represents from the keter, from the crown, to Teferet, which is again up until where it's still inspiration that's still within, and Rachel represents the lower aspect of that. Thus, the lower of Ima represent the upper half of Zerampin, becomes Leah. The lower of Ima is the lower of understanding, as we spoke before. In order for there to be any emotions, there has to be a reduction of that which inspires them, as it's elaborated in great detail in Hasidism. The upper half of Leah remains beyond Zer Ampin and is thus represented by the question who. So the idea of who is a statement. It's an acknowledgement of not knowing, and therefore, when you talk about the concealed, the best way to describe it is not by what it is, but what it isn't. Who? What is it? And that's why the letters mean represent that which are beyond. Okay, we will now explain the coupling of Zerampin with Leah. It is necessary to explain this because its coupling with Rachel is self-understood, because Rachel is below, so that his and her Yesod can couple. But how can he couple with Leah? In fact, this is that coupling, by the way, is the terminology that's used for the lightened vessel to come together, for the idea and for the execution to come together. That's called coupling. So when you resonate with something, you could couple with it. But if you're not resonating with something, you can't couple with it. So in fact, this is the very reason why Jacob loved Rachel and Leah was hated, for his coupling with Leah was inconceivable to Jacob at first, before he was called Israel, as we said. So he had a disconnect in terms of the internal conversation that clearly was present with him and Rachel, and was not present with him and Leah, and therefore, even though he was with her and he was with her in the holiest of ways, but there was a blockage there, because in his own understanding of what he represents and what she represents versus what Rachel represents, he didn't see how it, it's an interesting conversation. It puts things in a different context about all that time, until he opens up his eyes and realizes, no, actually, she's actually the higher part of me that I didn't even realize I had. So here, all these years, she's the hated one. God forbid to say that she was hated in the respect that he treated her in a bad way. He was a very righteous and a holy person. But obviously, it was something about what she manifested and what she represented that he felt was inconsistent with what his job was, only to find out later, of course, that he wasn't really as clear about things as she was. This is alluded to in the Zohar, and God saw that Leah was hated. From here we derive that a person detests the nakedness of his mother. The explanation of this is as we have said. A man naturally recoils at the idea of incestuous relations with his mother. Since Leah manifested Ima, the mother of Zerah, and Jacob at first recoiled at the idea of marrying her. Okay, so, wow, deep. This is not a personality thing, as much as one would see it that way, and it makes sense that one would see it that way. It is not a personality thing. It's actually, again, the drive of what Yaakov understood his purpose to be, and what it was that, how he saw him and Rachel doing the work that he was there to do, and Leah didn't fit in his, at least in his opinion or his understanding at first, until later on. But we must first tell you about the Yesod of Leah and the Yesod of Zerampin that couples with it, and how this is done. Okay? Let me just see one thing, because we're going to see 1, 2. Okay, here we go. Okay. Here we go. Sorry. Yesod of Ima extends until the chest of Zerampin, as is known. From the 2 hinges and the 2 doors of Ima's Yesod, the 2 breasts on the chest of Zerampin are made, as we have explained in our exposition of the Zohar. There we've explained that this is the mystical significance of the verse, your strongholds will be powerful. The doors and hinges of the womb are understood to be the muscles that open and close it. Now, Arizal says the following in the Sha'ar Ma'amari HaRashbi. The supernal Ima is manifest in Zer Anpin via the intellect of Zer Anpin. Only Netzach Hod Yesod of Ima is manifest within it. Her Netzach Hod Yesod has three segments corresponding to the thigh, the leg, and the foot. These are manifest in the three Sefirot on the right side of Zer Anpin, Chachma, Chesed, and Netzach. The three segments of her Hod are manifest on the left side of Zer Anpin, i.e. in Bina, Gvura, and Hod. Her Yesod, however, is shorter, and when it is manifest in the middle axis of Zer Anpin, it reaches only as far as the chest, that is, in Tiferet of Zer Anpin. As we have explained elsewhere, because Yesod of Ima is an empty space unlike the masculine Yesod, as is known, Yesod is known as the name Shin Daled Yud. It is also known that in the Yesod of the woman there are two hinges, Tzir, and the two doors, Daled. As our sages said, the numerical value of the word for hinge, Tzir, is 300, and that of the letter Shin. When this is joined with one, the door letter Daled, we have the Shin Daled Yud. Shin Daled. Similarly, the second hinge on the door and the other side produces the other breast, and thus are produced the two breasts of the chest of Zer Anpin. In this context, the upper third of Tiferes of Zer Anpin is called Shin Daled Yud, which means my breast. This is the meaning of the verse, your stronghold, will be powerful. Shin Daled Yud, this may be interpreted to mean because of your hinges, you will be Shin Daled Yud. Okay, this is, of course, I forgot we had that part, but the Kabbalah, the teachings of the Arizal, unlike the later teachings of Hasidism, employed a metaphor that in a very deep way was the only way to really explain the manifestation of how things are in the spiritual world by having a relationship with things how they are in the physical world. It's a long conversation to get into. It's a long conversation to get into. The terminology of these are actually used in biblical terminology, like you have in Song of Songs, and you have these in human anatomy that's brought up in conversation. But of course, it's not meant to be in its simple meaning. Obviously, it's a very holy text. So similarly, in our conversation, this is the same too. Okay, let's go further. The Yesod of Leah is also positioned behind Zer Anpin, opposite the breast of her chest. Now, let me just explain what that means in the simplest of understanding. Remember, Leah is the inspiration, and Zer Anpin is the emotional response to it. So this means to what degree the inspiration reaches that which is an emotional response, and when the emotional response takes on kind of an engine of its own. The Yesod of Leah is also positioned behind Zer Anpin, opposite the breast of his chest. We will now explain exactly what is the Yesod that couples with the Yesod of Leah. We have already explained that at first, before it metamorphosed into a part of Zer Anpin, Zer Anpin comprised only the six extremities, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Later, when it matured, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes were elevated and became Chachma, Bina, and Das. And Netzach, Hod, Yesod were elevated and became Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes. After this, he developed new Netzach, Hod, Yesod. It follows that the origin of his mature Tiferes is his mature Yesod. It further follows that the Yesod of Ima and the Yesod of Leah and the original Yesod of Zer Anpin are all three at level of Zer Anpin's mature chest. The Yesod of Ima's Leah are positioned opposite Tiferes of Zer Anpin, but this Tiferes was initially Zer Anpin's Yesod, and therefore it has enough of its original nature still in its function as a Yesod, and thus Leah can couple with Zer Anpin. Okay, I'm not going to make any attempt to explain any of that. You're welcome to do more research online about this. These are very deep concepts. And if you're one that is more familiar with it and you're listening to this and it brings you benefit, I'm happy to hear that. I do want to say that all of these are ideas that are really, really, really seed level of very, very deep ideas. So instead of making any attempt to explain it right now, I'm just going to go further. And at least, even if at this point my intelligence or your intelligence may not be present to exactly what's going on, One thing I learned about the esoteric teachings of the Torah, your soul is present to this conversation. So that's something I could tell you. It's an interesting conversation of its own, but I go back to our conversation. When Leah turns around to face him, the Yesod of Imo joins with the Yesod of Leah inside it, and they fuse to become the Yesod of the feminine parts of it. It is with them that the Yesod of Zerampin that is there, at the level of his chest, couples as mentioned above. We will explain all this in detail in our commentary on the verse, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt. This then is the explanation of the statement in the Zohar, that from here we derive that a person hates the nakedness of his mother. The statement can now be understood literally. On another occasion, I, Rabbi Chaim Vital, heard my master of blessed memory of that Zerampin couples with Leah at the level of his das, which becomes the form of Yesod in order to couple with Leah. This is the mystical meaning of the verse, and Adam knew his wife. For this type of higher level coupling occurs through das and is called carnal knowledge. This explains why the verb to know is used as a euphemism for marital relations, rather than a verb more explicitly derived from Yesod, founded or like. As is known, the coupling of the level of das is hidden and concealed. This is why Jacob's coupling with Leah on the first night was concealed from him, as is known. In my opinion, both these explanations are the same, for the das of Zerampin extends until the chest, and it is the Yesod of that level. So I just want to say the following, that if you join me for this teaching, I hope you got something out of it. I want to just say the last part of it, right? We just read over here, the bottom line, because it is, it's always in the bottom line. This over here says the das of Zerampin extends until his chest, and that's the Yesod level. So, the word Chabad means Chachma Bina Das, which is three different statements of understanding, wisdom, the first three stages of the soul's intelligence, which is the Chachma, which is the ability to have a brand new idea that's beyond the context of what you know. And then there's Bina, which is the evaluation of that idea. And then there's Das, there's the bringing it into become the new way that we respond to whatever we respond to from that particular. Anyway, so the deal is that it says that extends until its chest, etc. It's really going into the way that the spiritual metamorphosis happens from inspiration to how we feel about something, etc. Having said that, thanks for joining, and you're welcome to send me an email if you have any questions and have any suggestions how we can make it more accessible. God bless and have a great week. Hello?